Amen. You may be seated. I stuck with the Nehemiah message because even though we were going to kind of do a theme of Veterans Day theme, and Debbie has some neat things planned. It's funny, it's neat, not funny, neat how this worked out. That the place we are in Nehemiah is also going to have some connotations for us in a military kind of way. Let me say at the very beginning of this message, Nehemiah we dealt with 2 weeks ago, criticism, and Nehemiah. We learned some good things, I know I have from Nehemiah about how to handle, how to deal with, how to deal with criticism that may or may not come our way. And this is another subject that we don't always talk about directly from the pulpit, discouragement. And all of us get discouraged. I can assure you ministers get discouraged and need help from the Lord in battling and dealing with issues and things that weigh on their heart and mind. I suspect every leader, every person in any place of responsibility has moments where they just feel like, man, this is a heavy load. Lord, I'm not sure I can handle it. And we always use that catchphrase and assume it came from the Bible. The Lord tells us he won't put any more on us than we can handle. And he certainly is faithful to us. But on occasion, even from ministry, discouragement can be a battle. I brought a quote from Rick Warren to the pulpit with me this morning. And see if this fits in your world too. I believe it does. He says about ministry, we put in long hours, we experience a unique form of loneliness, and we face difficult decisions sometimes daily. It's easy, he said, to get discouraged. And he goes on to say he thinks discouragement is one of the most deadly of diseases for leaders. Everybody can catch it, and be assured you can catch it more than once. And it's highly contagious, and it spreads easily and quickly. But then he concluded this quote with this: but discouragement is eminently curable. Amen? And I believe Nehemiah, this chapter of Nehemiah where we kind of got a sense how he deals with criticism, we're going to get a very clear sense how he deals with discouragement. And so in the beginning of the message, let me do the easy part first, I think. Here's some general reasons why we get discouraged. Brian, I almost called you, almost asked to sit down with you and get a more clinical definitions as to what gets people. What are some of these symptoms that lead people to be discouraged? But I stuck with the ones that I've seen in my time over the years in interacting with people, and I trust that you have a more exhaustive, better list than I have. The first one would be this, and it's found here in verse 10. They get fatigued, and there's a loss of strength. It said in verse 10, concerning the work, Judah said, the strength of the laborers is falling, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall. So Nehemiah has just encouraged them, put a guard, keep working, put a guard on the wall, keep building the wall. And now he gets word back from one of the men named Judah, everybody's fatigued. There's a loss of strength. And this is one of the clear things that can lead to discouragement. When we're burning the candle at both ends, it's easy to get discouraged and to get down. And sometimes it may not be a spiritual issue, may not be a good and bad issue, certainly may not be a carnal issue, may not be anything functionally wrong with us, except we just need rest, a vacation, some time away. Preachers learn that they need time away from the pulpit. Those of us, matter of fact, Brian and Lindsay, and I did do Lindsay here, Lindsay, thank you. I've done twice. Called her Jessica this morning, called Brandy Jessica on the bus last week. I don't know what Jessica's done to get on my mind so much, but Stephen Jessica's on my mind a good bit this morning. They're in the midst of a remodel. I don't know how they're handling it, but let me tell you how it goes at our house when we're in the midst of something big. And I've done a number of over the years. It's much easier to me to do the remodels. Matter of fact, I built 2 houses. It was much easier to go build the houses and oversee them than it was to oversee the work taking place at the house. And I thought initially that would not be the case, but every time I've been involved with something, the fact that it's at the house, it's messy. You kind of get excited when it starts, and when it's a challenging spot. You know, for me, when you're in the midst of a project, halfway through is kind of challenging. And notice verse 6 of chapter 4 said they were halfway through with the wall. And so they're losing their strength, and I think this is kind of a natural phenomenon that happens because when we're halfway through, when the newness of it, when we got our strength up and said, yes, I can do this. This can be anything. It can be treatments. Like Jarita's just gone through, or Dwayne has just gone through. You kind of get up for them and you kind of see an end time. But sometimes folks have told me halfway, you're kind of halfway there and you're halfway not there. can be a challenging time. Matter of fact, when I used to run at the old house that we lived out on Clay Circle off of South Water Road, I had a running track that I ran, and I had a particular distance I was running. I can't remember exactly what it was, 3 or 4 miles. I would run a distance away, and I'd make my way back to the house because I wanted to stay on more neighborhood roads. And I would cross the house, go to the bottom of the neighborhood where Richard and Wendy Rustin live, and then make my way back to the house. And when I got back to the house that first time, I was halfway through running. You know what I determined? This is not a good plan. Because when I was halfway through, I would think, why don't you just call this a good day? So I have learned, for me, when I run, it's better to run the distance away that I'm hoping to get there, and then have the target to come home, because it's easy to get discouraged and to get tired, and it can lead to discouragement because we're just physically, emotionally worn out. That's what was going on here. They literally were having a moments where they were fatigued. They were losing their strength, which is a classic way of saying they're fatigued. The second thing that typically happens that can lead to discouragement is you get frustrated. And here is what I noticed that they're getting frustrated about. It's at the end of verse 10. There is so much rubbish, the New King James says, that we're not able to build the wall. Rubble, brick, mortar, trash. It's everywhere. They're trying to work, and then they pile up the rubble, and nobody's getting the rubble out of the way. Because what do people want to do? They'd rather work on the project and not have to be the cleanup person. And if you're like, man, this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, whether it's here at the church or doing something at the house, man, I like to go work on the project, and when I leave everything as clean as possible, so when I go the next day, it's not kind of a mess. But, man, that just doesn't always work out, because to go and try to work in the mess can be a challenge. And so for a house project, it can be. For a wall project, that can be the same. But this also fits moms, young moms. Dirty dishes, load of clothes, hampers full, toys strode, trying to manage work and the children and the husband and life, and it works the same way with the other spouse, and you got a job and you got life and you got the family, and then you're also trying to help the community build a wall, and in the midst of all this rubbish, it can just lead to discouragement. I believe that's why Judah made a point to mention both these things. Their strength is fallen, and there's rubbish everywhere. We can't do what we need to do. My mom was a fanatic. She raised 5 children. We lived in a little small house with 1 bathroom. Mama vacuumed pretty much every day. Beds had to be made every day. The kitchen was mopped a couple of times during the week. Mom, you just kind of got it from Hazel on that the house had to be kept clean because she just couldn't handle the rubbish. It's amazing to me that other people can handle the rubbish, but for people who rubbish and rubble and dirt is a challenge, man, it just can wear you down. The third thing that was causing discouragement here that I also find here is failure, lack of progress is happening, which leads to a lack of confidence. Look at verse 11. Judah goes on to say, our adversary said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them. Oh, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself on the point. The key here is the end of verse 10. We're not able to build the wall. We're tired. They're tired. There's so much rubbish we can't work, and now we can't even get the wall built. And I know confidence is a big thing. I admire people who always exude confidence. It's a gift, I believe, that God gives people. Matter of fact, I believe the Lord wants us to have this in our heart, because He wants us to not have our confidence in ourselves. He wants us to have our confidence in Him and see our confidence in Him and our hope in Him and our help is in Him. And I want to say something here. Nehemiah was hearing something that everybody is going to everybody's going to face one day. That there's a lack of confidence that can come from the enemy. I'm not up to this. Or if you've been doing it a long time, I'm not up to this anymore. Somebody else can do this better. A change. Maybe it's needed for them or needed for me. And many times this can come from just the discouragement that can come from the load that's being carried. And Nehemiah himself wasn't experiencing this, but he recognized right away, this is what's going on. They're tired. They're in the midst of rubble, in the midst of a project that's halfway through, and this is a hard place to be because they got as far to go as they have already gotten. And they would have sure thought maybe by now they'd be a little farther. And then sometimes you just blow it. And sometimes in the midst of the best efforts, you blow it. And I got to tell you, y'all, whether it's a pastor or whatever you do in leadership, there's going to be times that it doesn't work out. What you sure thought was the thing that you ought to do. And it's not the end of the world. Because everybody who leads anything has failures that happen to them. They start a business and it doesn't click, but the next time the business clicks. The new ministry project they thought was great to do, they start, but it doesn't click. Failure is just what comes with it. As a matter of fact, pro athletes have learned this. Matter of fact, this has always humbled me about pro athletes, whatever the sport. I follow the golf world, even though, goodness, probably played 3-4 rounds of golf in 18 months, but I still watch a good bit of golf. And golfers fascinate me, how they can be so good, and then sometimes when they're in a serious slump and they're doing real bad, and then they get the title, the comeback golfer of the year. Typically, this is one of the things they said, that when they got to where they were playing so bad, not only did they have moments where they played bad, but then it spiraled downward. And they said, uniformly, they almost always say, males and females, I lost confidence. I lost confidence in my swing. I lost confidence in that ability. I lost confidence in my putting. So they went around changing things. Matter of fact, I watched a documentary the other day on the Boston Celtics. And in my younger days, I was a Laker fan. And boy, looking back, I wonder, why was I a Laker fan? But watch this just neat documentary on Red Auerbach and the Boston Celtics. And this was after his time. So you got, well, it could be Bob and them would know, Bob, if I blow this on who was the coach at the time. Bill Russell I know it wasn't Bill Russell wasn't playing, but Bill Russell was interviewing Larry Bird, and Red Auerbach was there for the interview. And he asked Larry Bird, how did you know, why did you have this supreme confidence that at the end of the game, whatever the key shot was, you wanted the shot? You lobbied for the shot. You didn't want anybody else to have the shot, and you had supreme confidence that more likely than not, you can make make the shot. He said, Larry Bird said to him, and they actually showed the clip, as hard as I worked, and he's one of those rare athletes. He said the worst thing that can happen to an athlete is lose their confidence. And it's the worst thing that can happen to us as a mom, as a dad, as the preacher. It makes all of us. And think about it. These are pro athletes, whether it be golf or basketball or baseball or football or name the sport. When the confidence winnows away, they get discouraged and they feel like they're a failure. It affects them and affects what they do. Man, we're not superhuman beings. We're people loved and changed and ordained and encouraged and children of the living God. So give yourself a break. There are times when what you're trying and what we're trying to do is not going to always come together. But boy, just put your hand to the plow and don't look back and keep going forward. The fourth thing I notice here, and it's found in verse 11 and 12. Fear causes discouragement. A loss of security causes discouragement. Verse 11, verse 12. And our adversary said, they will neither know nor see anything until we come into the midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came, they told us 10 times, from whatever place you turn, they will be upon us. They get afraid. Man, they've gone from criticizing, sarcastically calling out to them, to now seriously threatening them. And no matter what, we're going to show up and we're going to burn you down. And there's this fear that comes with that. Well, there's so many things that could be said about fear to be a whole nother message. But let me say this. Let me ask a fair question, y'all. What fear on occasion causes you to be discouraged? Fear of criticism, embarrassment, that you're not capable for the task, that you can't handle the pressure. You know, when I know I can tell it's fear that's causing my discouragement, it's when I have an intense desire to run and to bail. I know I've got my eyes off the Lord and I've got my eyes clearly on the problem. And I'm not seeing and thinking clearly. I suspect it's the same for you, and it was the same for these folks. Halfway through, they've been hanging tough, getting going, and now in the midst of this, man, they're just ready to dig. You know what I've learned in my life? It's rarely God's will to me to run from difficult situations, rarely. Matter of fact, a good fair look at the Bible makes clear that very seldom in the midst of challenges did God want his men and women to run. He wanted them to rise up with his help for whatever the challenge was. And I've learned, and still learning, let me be careful, still learning that running from fear only makes the fear bigger. You have to just kind of face it. And so this is what Nehemiah realizes has got to take place. Another quote from Rick Warren. He said this. He said, the most relaxing day, he said this about 20 years ago, the most relaxing day of my life was when I resigned as general manager of the universe. I realized something. The world did not fall apart the day I did that. I felt like, this is him going on, I felt like I was Atlas. The whole world was on my shoulders. And he said, you know when I recognized, he said, I just really had to let it go. I'm not that important. I'm not that big a deal. And he learned this lesson too that I want to share with you. That God is very seldom early. But like Larry Burkett used to say, he's never late. He always shows up. Have you noticed just this football weekend? Well, I can't use Georgia as an illustration. Where's Glenn Lyles? I'd like to see what he's got to say about Georgia today in the pulpit. Get my friend down here. But you know, Alabama. The game wasn't over to the end of the game because it's not over to the end. Just spoke about pro basketball. Man, basketball is the sport. Both pro basketball and college basketball, those coaches and the players know the game's not over till the very end because it's many times, especially during March Madness, last second shots. All over the place. Heroic shots. Shots that put a person in infamy occur. It happens in football. And you know what else you know? You know what else you know? To help us not realize it's all on us. There's plenty of people willing to help. And I depend. Matter of fact, this morning I depended on the board. I wanted to hear their wisdom and hear their thoughts. And collectively we could agree this is good. This is favorable. This is still this and this. Collectively. You know why? Because you get wisdom in a multitude of counselors. And also, no football game in history was ever won without making substitutions. Never. Some teams like Alabama and others are blessed with deep benches. But whatever, folks, it's okay to say, I need a little break. I need a little rest. I need a little step back. And trust that if it's really needed, that God's got people in place in whatever your role is to help it to go forward without you having to carry all the load and everything that's going on. Man, I'm telling you, fear can make you feel like a failure. It can make you feel discouraged. It can make you feel so low. And it's the opposite of this great verse from the Old Testament. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. So 4 quick things. That's the things that clearly from this passage jumped out at me that are causing this discouragement. So here's when you look at Nehemiah and how he navigated this is how he kind of plugged them in. I got a couple of these from Charles Swindoll's book, Hand Me Another Brick. Just a great book on the book of Nehemiah. The first thing he did is verse 13. I want you to notice. Look at it with me. Therefore, I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families. Notice this. I set the people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. This is what Nehemiah knew. Being with family and having their family nearby is going to help the workers work. Because then they don't have to worry while they're working, what's happening to my family? Because one of the biggest things we all juggle is the responsibilities that we have in life and the high priority that God places on us for our families. And I believe for me, my calling is God first, my family second, and my church family then. And all of us struggle, man, working moms, working dads, all of us. And for Nehemiah, he knew, man, this could help calm some fear, some anxiety. Because right there, this is what's going to happen. You're working and your family's right there. So they just moved the families all to where they're all working together. They were now no longer separated. And I thought about this great weekend that we're celebrating. Man, how blessed we are to have troops, soldiers and airmen all over the world and soldiers all over the world tonight who would love to be sitting in a pew with family today. And they do this with their family back at home, with a concern for their great country and a concern for their family. And I just say, I hope that'll remind all of us to keep praying for them, to lift them up in the Lord. Because one of the neat things that help all of us to keep putting a foot in front of the other is knowing everything's okay with the family. And as we talked in the book of Proverbs a couple of weeks ago, man, when things aren't well with the kids, when things aren't well with the children, those Proverbs, so many of them speak about how it just breaks the spirit of a mom and dad, how it weighs on a mom and dad when things are not well, but when things are good and they can see they need it. They understood the importance of having the loved ones and the family there. The second thing Nehemiah knew was important and maybe even more important than that, verse 14. It says he looked and he arose and said to the nobles and to the leaders and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Listen to this. Remember the Lord. Remember the Lord, the great and awesome God, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. He wanted them to have the peace. Okay, family's here. You're right here. Your family's right nearby. So they're near you. They're the ones bringing you a little bite to eat. They're the ones getting you a little water. They're the ones maybe back and forth with the bow and the sword and the working tools. Just got them all together, but kind of by family. But then said, more than just family. Man, family's important. But hey, let's focus on God. Let's focus on the fact that we serve a great and awesome God. Let's focus on the fact that God has been faithful, that God's the one that got us here, got us into this project, got us now halfway through with the project. He is not going to, matter of fact, he could almost go all the way to Philippians and say to us what we ought to hear sometimes. What Paul said to the folks at Philippi, the God who began his work in you will make sure to complete the work he began in you. And I just love that because it's not up to me that the work that God wants to complete in me gets done. I get to play a very small part of yielding to God. But if it's going to get done, and it's going to get done if it's God's will, all the honor, all the glory, and all the praise goes to God because he supplies the strength and the ability and the wisdom and the grace and the encouragement to do what he calls us to do. Amen? Man, we get to play a part, but it's God who plays the big part. And that's what Nehemiah wanted them to see. Hey, get your family close by. Let's get the family for them, but then focus on the Lord. Not on the rubble, not on the enemy, not on your own projects, not on your discouragement, not on your fears, but on God. The third thing he did was in verse 14 and 15. Look at this with me. And he said he looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, the great and awesome God. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives. I'm sorry, I'm reading it all again. But, oh me, when I copied this, didn't get it, oh me. I want to read this. Oh, Brady's got it on the screen. Never mind, I don't need my Bible. Brady. What did I just read, Brady? 14? Say yes, somebody. 15, Brady. Give me 15 and 16, Brady. And it happened when our enemies, I can see it, y'all. I can see it. And it happened when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, every one to his work. In verse 16, so it was from that time on that listen to this, half of my servants worked at construction while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and more armor. And the leaders were behind all the house of Judah. So here's a beautiful thing to me. And I got this one from Charles Swindoll. The Lord helped Nehemiah to say, here's the right balance. Get the family close by, get your eyes on the Lord. So this third one, find the right balance. And the right balance was, man, if this is going to work, then when we're there, we got to be prepared for battle. We got to eat. We got to work. We got to do the things that we're called to do. We got to make it happen while half hold the spears, half hold the bows, and half do all the stuff. The other folks have got to do this. And then it said in verse 17, those who built the wall and those who carried the burdens loading themselves so that with one hand they worked on construction and the other hand they held a weapon. And you may say, Brother Tim, that doesn't sound like a bunch of help, but it does. It does sound like they were stretched. Y'all, I don't want to minimize. The reason they got to this place, they're stretched. They're in the midst of a huge construction project in a short amount of time. And they're facing danger that they have to be prepared to fight. So this isn't just critical danger. This isn't just dealing with the zoning board. This isn't just hoping to get things passed in a local county or state or the EPA laws and all this. This is dealing with folks who are trying to kill them in the midst of the project. And so Nehemiah understood the importance of them working and gathering. One working and one bringing the other stuff for them. And it kind of goes back to a Greek motto. You will break the bow if you always keep it bent. You will break the bow if you always keep it bent, but on occasion you have to let it bend. And can I say this here? This is Veterans Sunday. I know there's some in a small group in the Christian world that just pacifists, and I don't mean that in a critical term, but just don't believe in fighting and they have a conscience about it, and I would never want to minimize. But I'm thankful, aren't you, that we have folks on a Veterans Day weekend that we can celebrate who serve our country, who understand what Charles Swindoll said in his book on this particular chapter. He wearies of Christians who always are looking for a fight. Wearies of Christians who are always looking for a fight. But he equally wearies of Christians that don't understand there are some things worth fighting for. Well, I thought that was a classic quote from a godly man. Nehemiah understood that your families were fighting for. Jerusalem was worth fighting for. The defense of this wall and this project was worth fighting for. And so, yeah, we're going to have working supplies in one hand and we're going to have sword in another. I'm going to get your family close by where they're not so far away that you can't be there for them. And then here. And so listen, because they're spread out and they're stretched. And again, y'all, this is such a beautiful plan. They're spread out, they're stretched. The last thing was this. And it's verse 19 and 20. I want you to look at it with me. Then I said to the nobles, the rulers, and the rest of the people, the work is great and expensive. The work is great and expensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. So this is what he told them to do. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us here, and our God will fight for us. So he determined a rallying cry for them. And Charles Swindoll said this rallying point was both a place and a principle. The place was, come where the sound of the trumpet was, but the principle was, we all need a person, a group of people that we could connect with when the attacks of the enemy come. We do better when we do battle with others against the enemy than when we do solo battle with the enemy. And we're more likely, like Elijah, to get discouraged when we stay on our own. And we're more likely to flourish and hang in there when we keep others with us and others involved. Or we cry out and say, I need you. I need your guidance. I need to hear your heart. I need your wisdom this morning. I need to hear from you about that. And then I love this. I love the way this concluded. Go all the way down with me to verse 23. This is what Nehemiah says. So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of the guard who follow me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. Now that'll get you discouraged. But this is how dire, I want you to get a sense, this is how dire the situation was. You know what I thought of on this beautiful Veterans Day weekend? Many times I've gotten emails from James Bazemore and others, but especially James over the years. Going all the way back to the first Gulf War in the early 90s. I probably was a little later than that when James was sending me emails and I was getting emails from folks in the church. But many times from you, I've gotten the emails of our soldiers and our airmen and our Marines. And they'll be in Afghanistan or Iraq, and there'll be a convoy of vehicles parked, and they'll be all beside those vehicles just laid out, resting. Sleep. Just resting wherever they could find a place to rest. Sometimes it'd be Afghanistan and they'd be in mountainous areas and they'd just be crashed while others were watching guard. And as I read this, I thought, wonder how many days those men and women and folks we have in our church family, still one man from World War II, folks from the Korean War, and folks who served in Vietnam and served during that time and served from every Gulf War and Iraqi war and Afghanistan war, and places around the world now. We've just been learning. We have folks in North Africa and around the world so that we can live freely. And this is what they do. They spend days where they very seldom are out of their clothes except to wash them and get them back on so that we can breathe. This is a picture of what was going on then, and it's a picture to me of how faithful God is in the midst of it. So this is what I said. I told Debbie we'll do an invitation this morning, and I'll just, for time's sake, I just feel led to stay with it. Time's sake isn't the concern. But I want you to know, I hope for you, like me, this is a passage I look at often. And part of me sometimes just says, don't preach that, Tim, because folks, that's just, discouragement, kind of a downer kind of message. But I hope for you it's a benefit to me, because this passage helps me to kind of fundamentally go, okay, Tim, the reason you're getting to this place is this, and the way you get out of this place is to keep your focus here. And there's others in God's words, but this is a beautiful one. So I pray that there'll be some folks here today this will be a benefit to. I'm going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes. And if you say to me, Brother Tim, a good message for me this morning, a good message for me to hear this morning, would you just slip your hand up and say, wow, thank you. God bless you. Yeah, slip them eye. God bless you, church family. God bless you. I'm going to ask you to stand if you would, church.